Thank you for that kind applause. I'm Sheila Anderson, host of Weekend Jazz After Hours on WBGO Newark, and also Salon Sessions, and I'm also on Sunday Night Music Mix. And I'm delighted to be here to introduce these great musicians. This is going to be an incredible afternoon of music, and this digital residency by Amherst Glebe Arts Response, organized in partnership with Cecilia Smith and Lafayette Harris Jr., has been made possible with support from Chamber Music America through its Residency Endowment Fund. AGAR's concerts in 2021 to 2022 are also made possible in part by the National Endowment of the Arts for the Arts, the Virginia Commission for the Arts, Virginia Humanities, and Greater Lynchburg Community Foundation. Copyright 2022, Lafayette Harris Jr. and Cecilia Smith. And now to say something about these two people I've known for many, many years. Wonderful people, wonderful musicians. Lafayette Harris, I've seen him perform so many times. You know, he was the go-to pianist for so many musicians. Max Roach, I saw him with Sheila Anderson. He works with my favorite Houston person, and also he had his newest recording, You Can't Lose with the Blues, was #1 for 2 weeks on the Jazz Week jazz chart, starting in February 2020, and stayed top 10 for 14 weeks. Give Lafayette Harris Jr. a round of applause. And now Cecilia has an equally exhausting resume, rightfully so, vibraphonist, composer, multimedia artist. And she's performed across the United States and internationally as a leading vibraphonist of the 4-mallet technique. She's an avid composer and arranger with 6 internationally released albums, and her most recent CD is titled Dark Triumph, spoken word project with the orchestration and features the Boys Choir of Harlem. Her most recent activities include New York City Vision 25 Festival collaboration with poet Tracy Morris, and also in July she streamed Mallet Clinic in Sarasota, Florida, and of course Chamber Music America Digital Residency Grant recipient, presenting Amherst Glebe Arts Response, and Lynchburg, Virginia, Commonwealth, the University, Richmond, Virginia, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and concerts with stream in August, September, and October 2021. So welcome to this great performance, and give Cecilia a round of applause.
Thank you. This is a residency, and so because this quote-unquote terminology of residency, this is our 3rd presentation. But part of the residency definition is that we talk about the work that we're playing and explaining it in terms of its historical significance, different types of tidbits of interesting information on these pieces. So the first piece we're going to play is called All Blues. It's composed by
Mr. Miles Davis.
Miles Davis, right. Taken from his recording.
The most highest selling CD of all time, or jazz recording of all time, and that's called Kind of Blue.
That's right. And one of the reasons that this record is so significant is because of the improvisational approach to music during that time, right?
Okay. Yep.
And Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bill Evans was the pianist and one of the collaborators for the compositions. They came up with the concept of modal playing. Modes are also known as scales, and because of this, it was an approach to jazz that had nuances with rhythm and simplistic melodies.
Yes. Yeah, and so for the most part, Miles and Bill Evans, they worked together, came up with these tunes. They said, okay, we're going to use this mode and on this, and we're going to move here, that, not to get too complicated in explaining it. But once they set that mode, the melodies, they didn't take them too far out.
Right.
Rhythms, they didn't get too crazy.
Right.
And it's a very accessible
Accessible is a good word.
recording.
Exactly.
Yes.
So without further ado, here we go. right, thank you very much. All right, so we're going to move right on along here. Our second piece is actually a theme from a film called Theme from Valley of the Dolls. Anybody remember that movie? Anybody old enough to remember that movie? Watched it twice, okay.
That's way back.
Way back.
Uh-huh.
Well, this piece was actually sung by Dionne Warwick during her time with Hal David, Burt Bacharach, or you all who might remember Walk On By or Do You Know the Way to San Jose. But Hal David and Burt Bacharach did not write this piece. This piece is composed by Andre Previn. Andre Previn was a great conductor of the Pittsburgh Symphony, and he was involved with a lot of soundtracks. And so we chose this piece because it's got such a memorable melody, and some of you who might say, I think I remember that melody. You might know it after we play it, except for I've drastically changed it up.
Like most jazz musicians.
Yes, yes. Jazz musicians like to take beautiful melodies of pieces that they've heard and turn it to, the melody stays the same, but the structure of the composition has changed somewhat. What other things did we find out about this piece?
Oh, well, he's German-American. He was a great composer.
Right.
But was mostly known as a conductor.
Classical.
And he was a fine jazz pianist.
Yes, one of the few back at that time that, had an incredible knowledge of symphonic music, but a great respect for jazz. One of my favorite recordings is one of the recordings he did with Sarah Vaughan with Symphony Orchestra. You remember that piece, that recording? It's just beautiful. Anyway, Theme for Valley of the Dolls is also an iconic film that talked about women who had challenges with drug abuse. They had the thematic part of the piece is that their dolls were pills that they took to change their mood and how they felt. And it's quite the film. There was a second film that came out, right?
That's right.
Return of the Valley of the Dolls. It actually had an African-American female in terms of the women who were featured in this particular film.
She had the most healthiest relationship. Not just one, but
She had several, but they were healthy.
They were quite healthy.
So if you're nostalgic, intuition would like you to go. These are films that you can definitely check out. But we'd like to play our interpretation of Theme for Valley of the Dolls.
All right.
Here we go.
Okay.
right.
You made it sound like you wrote it.
Oh, that's how we're supposed to do, right?
That's what it says.
All right. Oh, well, we're moving right along here to our third piece for this performance. This is taken from the Great American Songbook, which is defined as.
What is it?
What is it?
It's a body of work written by mostly men and women who are writing for Broadway, television,
Tin Pan Alley.
And movies
And movies.
of the time period, definitely.
Yes, it's a large body of work. This piece that we're playing called I'm Old Fashioned is written by Jerome Kern and Johnny Mercer. And the thing that we found out that was interesting about Jerome Kern and Johnny Mercer is that Jerome Kern was born in late 1800s. He wrote a lot of what we call Great American Songbook pieces. And Johnny Mercer, there was a 20-year difference in there.
Yeah, different generation.
Different generation.
Yeah.
And so what we read about them in terms of this particular piece is that Johnny Mercer was just in awe of Jerome Kern and loved working with him. The great thing about the Great American Songbook, it is one of the ways that African American jazz musicians and American jazz musicians came together. And
White American.
Huh?
White American.
White Americans, right? And the thing that was interesting is that they didn't really have to meet each other, but they wanted to reinterpret these pieces, to put it in a jazz setting. And so there are lots of compositions from the Great American Songbook that jazz musicians have reinterpreted.
Yes. And I would say that during that time period, you had a lot of more progressive interracial relationships
With music.
than what was going on in the rest of the country.
Yes.
Yes. So
From an artistic point of view, once again,
Yes.
artists bringing things together.
Yeah, we're bringing it all together. And that's a big one. Because you have people like Lionel Hampton being in there with Benny Goodman.
That's right. Mary Lou Williams also played with Benny Goodman.
Okay, and Teddy Wilson on the piano.
He was daring in including African Americans in his ensemble.
And Dave Brubeck had African American bass player. And as a matter of fact, there was a tour that they were doing down south, and the universities down south, when they found out that he had an African American bass player, they were like, "Don't come." Well, no, they were like, "Get a different bass player." And so Dave was like, "Well, no, I just won't come," and they didn't want to lose out on that money, so they changed their ways. So he's one of the people that brought people actually together.
Made them change.
Cut that stuff out.
That's right. So this is I'm Old Fashioned by Jerome Kern, Johnny Mercer from the Great American Songbook.
there's only the first set. So you're excited now. When it's over, you're going to be real excited for hearing this great music. This is blowing me away. It's
Well, I'm glad because you hear music every night.
Exactly. So I was like, wow. Let's talk briefly about why. Well, the two. When you think about piano and vibes, most people think about Chick Corea and Gary Burton.
Right.
Why is it that there tend to be so few pairings of vibes and piano, in your opinion, if that is your opinion?
I do have an opinion.
Okay, good.
Well, first of all, you have to find a piano player who is going to be wanting to play with a vibraphone player. And you have to work out certain things. You got to work out chordal approaches. We have to make sure that the arrangements make sense. And so there's not many piano players who want to do that, first of all. McCord Tyner and Bobby Hutcherson, they never played in duets, but they did play together in quartet settings. And Bobby Hutcherson played mostly with the two-mallet technique. And so the four-mallet technique is what kind of is a different skill set. Not to say that one is better than the other, because Bobby Hutcherson is like one of my favorite improvisationalists. But this combination of uniting chordal structures and rhythms, you have to have a piano player who's open to that.
Now, is it because the piano and the vibes are so similar instrumentally?
Exactly. Well, they are
Not
similar.
instrumentally.
I don't know if you can see the piano keyboard is much like a piano, but my black keys, they're all are like his black keys.
But they're gold.
Well, except for the gold. They're not black on his. And so I first played piano, then I played drums. And so it was a natural transition when I went to a high school that had an extraordinary music program. And I saw the xylophone. I was like, oh, I could do that. So, there is, but the approach harmonically is what the challenge is, to be able to unite these two instruments. And because of the pandemic, we had time.
To practice.
To be quite frank, that is really what has brought us together since, the end of January?
Wow. Something like that. So
yeah.
Our first performance together was
in March.
Women's History Month?
Yes. And actually, Lafayette is one of my neighbors. He lives down the street from me.
Better still.
My sons rolled her vibes down the street.
I
wasn't going to do it.
Yeah. And I was reluctant at first because we often would stop and have coffee. We talk about different things. He said, well, why don't you do something with me? And I was like, I haven't really been playing, since this pandemic thing. And so he said, and I said, let me see what you got first. So he has transformed his home into a studio with cameras and lights and a Steinway Grand. It's like amazing.
Lights, camera, action, right?
And I have to say also that a couple of my friends, including Lafayette and another guitarist, Ron Jackson, they have figured out this streaming thing because it is a brave new world.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's a brave new world and a way to develop audiences online. And we kind of digressed here from your original question.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, we can, take it to another way. You've chosen, in my opinion, a very eclectic, choice of tunes, and addressing the Great American Songbook. Can you just talk briefly about how jazz musicians not only interpreted many of the songs, but how some of the jazz standards like ornithology and other songs written were basically on the changes of the great.
Well, in terms of historically,
what
was going on historically.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you do ask that because the Great American Songbook was one approach that jazz musicians did take. But then when bebop came along, in the late 40s, 50s?
Well, late 30s, early 40s.
It also correlates with what was going on with civil rights as well. The different things that African Americans were able to fight for, also chronologically, were stated in the musical forms. The complexity of bebop was also, united with the complexity of different things that were going on for African Americans in terms of the change of their you know, worlds in a white America that was resistant for change. And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Louis?
yeah,
Okay.
yes.
And as we go on, the bebop
Yeah.
was extraordinarily complicated,
Yes.
you know, in terms of the melodic lines.
Yes.
And to apply that to a great American songbook, you know, it was inspiring. I mean, you know, obviously was not around during that time, but, you know, as jazz musicians who are studied, we study all of the transitions of jazz, you know, and we learn how it does unite with the social standings of our stay in this country.
Well, speaking of transitions, we're going to transition to you doing another great writing team, Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn.
Yes.
And one of my favorite songs, Daydream. So can you talk about it a little bit, and we'll hear some more. And again, give them a big round of applause. Thank you.
Daydream is one of the lesser known Billy Strayhorn, Duke Ellington pieces. And this is our third presentation of this kind. And the last presentation we did Lush Life, which is another very noted, probably Billy Strayhorn's most noted piece, Lush Life. Extraordinarily complex pieces of music that Billy Strayhorn composed, and his writing partner, Duke Ellington. So we decided
To continue on.
to continue and include another one of his pieces. You want to talk a little more about this piece?
This, I would say, is definitely not as complicated as Lush Life.
Kind of close, though.
Yeah, it's getting up in there. Yeah, but music stands today is like way out there.
It is.
You know, because you know what music is like today. You know, I don't even have to go in. But I would say that you know, it's got the standard 32 bar song form.
That's right.
And let's see, definitely from the swing era, 1939.
Exactly. And
this.
the thing that was unique about Billy Strayhorn is that he started writing Lush Life when he was 16 years old in high school and tweaked it for a number of years before he presented it, you know. And he had not only a way with harmonic structure, he was also an exceptional lyricist. If you Google it up and find Sarah Vaughan or any of the great vocalists to see these words that he applied to these pieces. I mean, he was such a lyricist and such a phenomenon. And so we decided to add that because we were like, we kind of want to add another Strayhorn piece to our repertoire. We now, since we've been playing since January, we have quite the repertoire. And so we decided this was not a piece that I was familiar with. And so we looked it up and loved the changes and the harmonic structure. So we'd like to play it for you today. This is Daydream.
Yes, Cecilia, yeah.
Thank you, thank you. For our next compositions, we are observing Latin American History Month. This month, actually, it's oddly placed in our calendar. It actually goes from September 15th to October
October.
15th. And so we thought we would take pieces from different segments of the world that has influence on jazz, right? So we're going to start with Brazil. And we are starting with Brazil. We're going to play the probably most noted composer from there. His name is Antonio Carlos Jobim. Mm-hmm. And the wonderful thing about Latin music influence is that we're going to go to Brazil, then we're going to go to Puerto Rico, and then we're going to go to Cuba. And so we're going to start with Brazil. And we thought we'd start with Brazil because of the influences of the Africans that were brought as slaves to Brazil. We found out, well, there's some very interesting points about that history.
Definitely. Many more enslaved people were taken to Brazil than they were taken here to the United States, North America in general. And well, first of all, Brazil is a lot closer to Africa. As a matter of fact, so many people and culture was taken from West Africa to Brazil. You can't even find it in Africa anymore. If you want to study that, you got to go to Brazil to study what's going on in West Africa. And so I think, I'm not exactly sure, but it may be like 20 to 40% of all enslaved were taken to Brazil.
That's right.
Whereas we only got a small amount here, only 5%.
Taken to the United States.
So if there's too many black people here, wait till you go to Brazil.
And one of the things that Lafayette was able to do early in his career was to go to Brazil.
I was still a very young man. New man at the time, 22 years old, and I went with my college jazz department was awarded the opportunity to do a, what do they call those things, Sheila, where you go State Department tour, right?
Yes, State Department tours.
And Wendell Logan was my jazz prof teacher, and him and Kenny Davis, a wonderful trumpet player. And a few students, including the wonderful Orville Hammond, who was actually a professional musician who had come back to get a classical degree.
From Oberlin.
From Oberlin.
You didn't say that.
I didn't say that.
Yes, you didn't.
Yeah, Oberlin, that was the school. And yeah, it's cool. Yeah. And we stayed there for a whole month.
Wow.
And our per diem, I remember our per diem was, whatever the form of money, it was over 1 million of them. So we were millionaires for a month.
So you thought.
One of the great things musically that happened while I was on that trip was that I heard some local guys in a bar playing the song we're about to play right now. And we were like, whoa, listen to the way they feel. That's not how we sound when we play it, So it was really a great learning experience. This is Antonio Carlos Jobim's Wave.
That's right. Thank you very much. So now we're going to go to Puerto Rico. All right, we're going from. And actually, this piece is actually taken from the Duke Ellington repertoire because one of his trombonists played valve trombone. There's slide trombone, and there's a trombone that you play like a trumpet, right?
That's right.
And his name was?
Juan Tizal.
Juan Tizal.
And he was from San Juan,
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're going to combine two pieces that Duke Ellington's is well known for. The first piece is Perdido, and the second piece is Caravan.
Caravan is Juan Tizal's most famous
Piece.
composition and one of the great, all-time great jazz improvisation vehicles, right?
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And so we were just going to do Perdido, but then as we were doing our research, since we had so much time on our hands, this last week,
Because we practiced.
that we found Caravan and we couldn't make up our minds what we were going to do. I said, well, let's do one, let's combine them, you know. So we have worked out some interesting things with this, right?
Here we go.
All right, here we go. thank you.
Yes, yes.
Right.
So now it's time to go where?
Going to Cuba.
Cuba.
All right.
All right.
And we're going to visit with Mr. Mando Santamaria.
That's right, man.
Yeah. And we're trying to figure out what our repertoire was going to be for this. And when we were investigating Mando Santamaria, is that I noticed that one of my friends was playing in his band back in the 80s. And I had never seen that video before. Tony Henson was a tenor player during the 80s with Mando Santamaria when I was a student at Berklee College of Music in Boston. Tony actually went to New England Conservatory.
Okay.
And there was an interesting batch of musicians during that time in the 80s in Boston. Jackie Byard was at New England Conservatory playing with the medium rare, had his medium rare big band where he, went all over the country looking for incredible African Americans to play in that band. But those students, including
E.J. Allen, right?
E.J. Allen was playing with them. But in that big band was Najee. Anybody know Najee? His real name was Brian, but I'm not supposed to say that. But he was also, he's known as like the great, commercial jazz alto player, but he's actually a pretty incredible musician. But back to Tony Henson. He plays on that recording that we studied.
Yeah. Very fiery solo.
Very fiery solo that he plays. And so we decided to add this to our repertoire because, of course, Cuba was where a lot of Africans from the west coast of Africa ended up in Cuba.
That's right.
And brought their influence. If you go to Cuba, the African influence in terms of the religious studies of that time, very prevalent there.
That's right. They got the voodoo down there.
Ooh, yes. And so we decided to add our flair to this piece. All right. So are we ready for this?
Let me see.
All right. Here we go. Thank you.
All right. Wonderful. Lafayette Harris Jr., Cecilia Smith.
Thank you.
What an incredible way to begin a Monday, right?
Thank you.
Food for the mind, the body, the soul.
Well,
There's some soul music. Thank you so much.
Well, a couple of things we have to say before Sheila does her thing is that we'd like to thank you all for coming to hear us during this incredible time that we're living through. And we'd like to also thank the main presenter. Her name is Lynn Cable. She lives in Amherst County, Virginia. I've known her for many years. She worked for one of the nonprofits that I worked for many years and retired there, and has had me come down there to play. And she's gone after a couple of grants for Lafayette and I after we did our first presentation in March. And so it's been a good ride with her, and she brought in some of her other presenter friends to do this. So we owe a great deal of thanks to Lynn Cable. So, yeah. And I also want to thank Sheila for coming down from Harlem to be with us in Brooklyn. And Sheila's always been a great supporter of our work. And you know, I didn't know she was going to want to come down during this time of ours, but she said yes right away. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. So we want to thank you for coming and supporting our efforts.
For asking me.
And because this streaming effort is new, and so they're not quite sure how to produce it, to promote it at WBGO yet, but it's coming, right?
No, not yet.
Not yet. But, you know, we are attracting lots of supporters of our work that we would not normally be able to have access to if it weren't for streaming. So, you know, I am most grateful for this situation, and thankful to Lafayette, who invited me to come play with him. And I was shocked and amazed that we could have such a great music co-relationship. It's been really wonderful, and we're going to continue. We're going to start doing more streaming, and we're working on our Christmas repertoire starting next week.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
You got?
Okay, again, I want to thank you all, and I personally want to thank you for coming and supporting WBGO and these great musicians. So it's been a great afternoon. I'm going to leave here feeling very good. Okay, Amherst Glebe Arts Response, Inc., in collaboration with VCU Health Arts in Healthcare, Gifts of Art, Michigan Medicine, University of Michigan presents Cecilia Smith and Lafayette Harris Jr. Duo. This is the third of 3 concert and lecture events in this Chamber Music America digital residency. It will be available from October 15th to November 15th, 2021. Cecilia Smith and Lafayette Harris Jr. have purposefully chosen these pieces that will outline the American influences on jazz, which includes pieces from the Great American Songbook, Latin jazz and Afro-Latin jazz, and other uniquely African-American musical aspects in the jazz art form. These are, thank you, jazz events devised to celebrate COVID-19 response to staff, individuals served, and families of these health providers, and they are in Greater Lynchburg, Virginia, Centra Health Community Health, Lynchburg General Hospital, Virginia Baptist Hospital, Central Virginia Alliance for Community Living. And in the VCU Health System, Virginia, the Arts and Healthcare Program VCU Health, Richmond, VCU Health Community Memorial Hospital, South Hill, VCU Health, Tappahannock Hospital, and also in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Michigan Medicine, University of Medicine, Michigan, Gifts of Art Program, and studio staff for this concert, Soapbox Gallery, Jimmy Greenfield, owner, Peter Carl, engineer, production manager, Michelle Etoiru, and WBGO Jazz Radio on-air host Sheila Anderson, and the art staff, VCU Health, Arts and Health, Director Philip Moosey Branch, Gifts of Art, Michigan Medicine, Director Elaine Sims, Performance Director Carrie McClintock, Amherst Glebe Arts Response Agar Inc., and Director Lynn Cobble. Thank you.
Thank you again, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate your presence here.
Thank you.
So, yeah.